It's a Victory Monday in Manhattan. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Happy Victory Monday as Kansas State is coming off a win against TCU, and it was a great win indeed. The defense stepped up. We heard from Klieman after the game, and he had some great energy, talked about how the energy for the entire team was feeling good, and hopefully they can continue that on as they wait now. We have a bye week, and then it's the game in Lawrence, the Sunflower Showdown. Can they keep the streak alive? And most importantly, can they remain with only 2 losses in Big 12 play? Because that gives you a chance. And I'm actually going to break that down. Arlington is still on the table. Before I do that, though, this episode's brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. Well, Kansas State coming off a nice victory against TCU on Saturday, moving themselves to 500 in Big 12 play. And with a win out on the season, they still can match and exceed, in my opinion, last season's record. Yes, they would be 8-4 just like last year, but they would have a 7-2 record inside the Big 12. That sounds like a whole bunch of things that still need to come true. I know it's still a long shot. I know what's left on the schedule. But after watching them play TCU, this is a team that reminds me of the offseason feels. It absolutely feels like this team can win the rest of the games on the schedule if they play the same way they did against TCU. The defense was outstanding. The offense stepped up, and even without guys like Dylan Edwards, you saw players like Joe Jackson and Avery Johnson move with their feet, and it's absolutely what they needed for the entire game, and hopefully they can continue that moving forward. Klieman spoke with the press on Saturday right after the game, and he opened up by praising the crowd and the toughness shown through adversity. The crowds, again, have been absolutely amazing at Bill Snyder Family Stadium, both the game against UCF and this game against TCU, where you are heading into the game with a losing record. You are getting 57,000 strong. I mean, it's absolutely insane that you're getting that many people show up to Manhattan. So shout out to you. If you're listening to this and you're at the game, shout out. That is absolutely outstanding, and I love to see it. He also called TCU one of the best teams in the Big 12. Respects Sonny Dykes deeply, and he's not wrong. I mean, I think TCU is still a great football team. Kansas State just proved that they belong at the top of the Big 12 as well when they're playing the way they should be playing all season. I had no idea how to really get a grasp on TCU this offseason. If you're an everydayer, you definitely know that. I made that very clear on my shows this offseason. But I think they proved some stuff. And honestly, Josh Hoover had probably one of his worst games in a TCU uniform, and that completely benefited Kansas State for sure. It helped the defense overhaul. It helped the defense spotlight him and get some scoring, and that ultimately helped Kansas State win the football game. They played pretty good in all 3 phases, and Klieman said that as well, including special teams, although there was maybe a little bit of blunder early in the game at special teams. But overall, I think Kansas State played a really good football game. I think it's the best game they've played all season. When you look at all 3 phases of the game, when you look at how the defense stepped up, it was definitely the best defensive game of the season. And although you're not breaking the bank with yards for Avery Johnson, you still had other players that needed to step up, like Joe Jackson. And I think that is huge. And if you can get that from your players that maybe you weren't expecting, because Joe Jackson, let's be real, hasn't lived up to the expectation that we hoped he was going to be with the thunder and lightning kind of combo with Dylan Edwards to begin the season. I think that we finally saw that on Saturday against TCU. Hopefully that can continue because the last 2 weeks, Joe Jackson has been great as that running back 1. And if those injuries still occur with Dylan Edwards, we don't even know if we'll have him back for the remainder of the season. I mean, it's still up in the air. I mean, who knows? Really, I have no idea. But at least we know we have some kind of stability in the backfield with Joe Jackson. Chris Klieman, the takeaway, the quote that I'm going to take away from his whole conversation on Saturday was 5 words here. And he said, "We're an ascending football team." And I love that. I absolutely do. I hate that he had to bring that up, you know, when you're in the middle of your season heading into your second bye week, but he's absolutely right. And this season isn't over as long as they can continue to ascend. They're heading into their toughest stretch of their schedule, hands down, no doubt about it, with Kansas in Lawrence, Texas Tech, Utah still on the slate in the next, 3 or 4 games. And they have to find a way to win all of them. So as long as they continue to ascend, I think they can absolutely do that. I absolutely think they can do that. What changed in this team's energy from Baylor to TCU? Honestly, I'm not sure much. I think the energy in Baylor's game was still pretty good. You just wound up losing a football game by 1 point. I mean, how much greater would this Victory Monday feel if you were 3-1 in Big 12 play instead of 2-2? I mean, you're talking only a few minimal plays against Baylor to make that happen. But I don't think discrediting the energy of Baylor and Waco changes that at all. The resolve to finish in the first half was something that maybe I would say actually was better in Baylor compared to TCU. The beginning of this game on Saturday was pretty tough. It was scoreless in the first quarter. Crazy to say after how high scoring this football game was. But overall, I do think I like the energy for Kansas State. And as Chris Klieman mentioned, they are ascending, and that's exactly what you need. It's an emotional relief heading into the bye week on a win. That's something we didn't get the first bye week. Remember, that was a dreadful loss against Arizona, a non-conference game, but maybe might come into play. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But now you're getting this win against TCU, a team that was very close to beating Arizona State. And now you are right back in the middle of the pack inside the Big 12. That's a good feeling to have. And while we're sitting, kicking back, watching Big 12 play this week without Kansas State being in play themselves, getting healthy and preparing for the game in Lawrence, there's going to be a few games that you're going to want to know who to root for, because there is absolutely a path to get Arlington still on the table. But before I talk about that, because I definitely want to discuss that, I'm going to give you a full watching guide for this week and explain to you in a scenario as to how Kansas State can get to Arlington. Crazy scenario, but absolutely possible. I want to talk about this defense a little bit more. We'll do that next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode is brought to you by Mazda, moving the game forward for those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are the moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. Well, this player put points on the board not just once, but twice. And this week's moment that moved the game forward, I'm going to double up here and say both the plays by Desmond Purnell. I mean, absolutely insane. One of them was a pick six, and the other one was an interception that led to more points as well. Just absolutely great play by the defense, and Purnell led the charge in this. Chris Klieman said that for years he's been saying that he believes he's one of the best players, one of the best defenders in the Big 12, and he finally got to put that on full display on Saturday against TCU. So when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. It's a Victory Monday here on Locked On Kansas State, your team every day. Be sure to hit that subscribe button as we are growing this Wildcat Nation, bringing you Wildcat coverage like no one else right here on Locked On Kansas State. We discussed a little bit about what Chris Klieman said just about the statement win, what he thought about TCU, and how they're an ascending football team. I want to kind of turn our points and turn our heads and thoughts to the defense, because as I mentioned, talking about the Mazda player of the week with Desmond Purnell, this defense was absolutely insane. This defense stepped up and truly had their best defensive performance of the season. And I think that alone deserves the quote of what Chris Klieman said, saying, "We are an ascending team." You can point at the Joe Jackson. You can point at Avery Johnson running the football, and surprisingly, he ran the football, because what Chris Klieman said the past week, I think he's kind of changed his tune on that after seeing, okay, we have to run this guy. We have to make it happen. But I think the ascending problems of the defense always being gassed, or the defense always running into secondary issues or having huge concerns? Or is Austin Romaine this Big 12 caliber type player that we've been hoping for and then hasn't really lived up to expectations early in the season, according to advanced data? Well, none of that really came into fruition until this week. And it all turned out really good, and the defense was outstanding. Chris Klieman revealed that they added what he said was new coverages and alignments in just 3 days' time. He said he spoke with Joe Klannerman. He said these things have to get taken care of, and it sounds like it worked out. Whatever those new coverages and alignments were, it worked into their favor, and it sounds like the coaching staff did a really good job making those adjustments. He also quoted that the purpose was to stop teams from picking on specific weaknesses seen on film. I'm not really sure what he meant by that, what he meant by certain specific weaknesses. I'm really not sure. You could talk about Zayshawn Rich, who has been out there almost every snap for the last 4 games, but he does allow receptions on most of his targets. For the most part, it didn't really happen this week against TCU. For the most part, they're all usually in front of him. Maybe that's what he's talking about, if I had to put just a finger on it and who came to my mind right off the bat, but I'm not really sure. But either way, the defense fooled TCU. They forced turnovers. They scored twice. They had 3 turnovers in the game for the defense. And as we mentioned, Desmond Purnell had a breakout game. Just a really good feeling for this defense. When you're losing guys on the pass rush with Toby Asusami, when you're losing some of these other cornerbacks that are really not stepping up, and then you're finally getting some really good play from this defense. Can they continue to ascend against Kansas? Because Kansas has been one of those up and down teams this season. They started off really strong. They've kind of got humbled over the past few weeks. They allowed a lot of sacks against Texas Tech. Can Kansas State do the same thing and make it a very tough day for Jalen Daniels and the Kansas Jayhawks? Hopefully they can. And if so, that ascension maybe can go all the way to Jupiter. When you're looking at the rest of this offense, though, Joe Jackson answered the challenge. And I want to talk about him one more time before we move on here. Dylan Edwards, the injuries, the constant narratives about him being out, or is he going to play, and is the game plan going to be surrounding around him? I think that's past us now. I don't think that we're going to have to worry about having that same conversation. If he's in the mix, great. Awesome. Let's go. When he's running the football, like we saw him against UCF, when we saw him against Rutgers in the bowl game, he's electric and he makes this offense almost unstoppable. Not taking that away from him. But the best trait is availability. There's no doubt about that. And so far, Dylan Edwards hasn't proved that he can be available. And, he's having a nagging, I think it's a foot or toe injury. And Joe Jackson stepped up and did exactly what he needed to do. He was challenged, said Chris Klieman, said, hey, this is your job now. You're running back 1. Go out and prove it that you're running back 1. And he did so. He went for over 100 yards the first time in his career and helped Kansas State secure a victory against a tough team in Sonny Dykes' TCU team. It was a nice rematch of the Big 12 championship in 2022 and the same outcome from 2022. Shout out to Garrett Oakley as well. I didn't realize this until the post-game presser. I must have missed this social media post or whatever the case during the game, but Garrett Oakley set a career record for touchdowns by a tight end for Kansas State program history. Again, just continuing that chemistry with Avery Johnson. They had such a great chemistry last year, again, with the tight ends leading the country in red zone touchdowns last year at 13. Oakley had 2 touchdowns in this one against TCU, and one of them was outside the red zone, went for 30-something yards. So it's nice to see that tight ends actually can be seen on the other 80 yards of the field as well. That's just a joke. But either way, it's really fun to see Garrett Oakley step up. And I'm glad that they're utilizing the tight ends more. That's something that they kind of went away from. Matt Wells went away from earlier in the season. And it kind of bit them. It was something that they were known for last season. They went away from that, maybe because they were trying to highlight and spotlight the new tall, big wide receivers on the roster. But then when injuries started to happen, they had no choice but to make that happen. And of course, get them back involved. I want to see more from Lincoln Cure. I'd love to see more Lincoln Cure because it's just he's just a fun athlete, and we're seeing him out there be more of a wide receiver. I've seen him make a couple good blocks. I'd like to see him get a couple of receptions. Maybe that can happen against the Jayhawks. That would be huge. A breakout game from Lincoln Cure in Lawrence would be electric. it would be absolutely electric. I could only imagine what the folks on social media would be discussing that entire Saturday game in Lawrence if Lincoln Cure went off, maybe scored his first touchdown. That'd be huge. Number one kid in Kansas scoring in the Sunflower Showdown. His first game would be absolutely amazing. This team was demoralized after Baylor, said Chris Klieman, but they found a way to win with resolve, leadership, and belief. He praised the players for sticking together and emphasized 1 week seasons moving forward. Absolutely love that. You can't look back in the past. You can't worry about the losses to Arizona, Army, Iowa State, Baylor. You can't worry about those because there's nothing you can do about it now. You still have a bright future ahead of you. You still have an opportunity to make it to Arlington. As crazy as that sounds, you still possibly do. And even if that doesn't happen, you can find yourself at an 8-4 record, maybe even a 7-5 record, and still get yourself to a nice bowl game. And that is respectable, at least after the start that you had to this season. The team's mindset has clearly flipped. They like the taste of winning, no doubt. There's no doubt about that. So hopefully they can continue that moving forward. Avery Johnson's growth as a rusher and decision maker has continued to improve. There was one moment of lapse, if you will, during that game that I remember where he slid a little bit too early, did not get to the first down marker. But they went right back to the well. They went right back to Avery Johnson that next play on 4th down, and he made sure he got it. Maybe I felt like he almost took that a little personal on that because he slid a little too early. That's just an adjustment that the coaching staff and Avery just need to work on. But after that, Chris Klieman said they had to rely on him more in the second half on running the football. And he said that in the press game. Chris Klieman said that Avery Johnson needed to be relied on to run the football. And that definitely sparked my interest, definitely piqued my head, because a week ago from we're talking right now, Chris Klieman discussed how he's not going to run Avery Johnson 15 times a game. And he wasn't wrong. Avery Johnson ran 13 times in this one. But because of that, now every time Avery Johnson has at least 10 carries in a football game, Kansas State's 8-3. It's a good field and a half, folks. It's a really good field and a half when Avery Johnson is showing that he can be a dual threat quarterback. He doesn't have to throw 300 yards per game. If he can find you that win, and of course, getting help from the defense absolutely helps that as well. All right, let's talk about the rest of the Big 12. We're off this week. We're going to have some good, fun conversations leading up to this week and next week for the Kansas game. We're going to talk some basketball as well. Perfect time to bring that into the mix. But before we do so, let's give you a full watch guide on what to pay attention to this upcoming week, who to root for, because there is a few scenarios where Kansas State can find themselves higher up the board in the Big 12 standings and get themselves to Arlington in just the end of the season. It's absolutely possible. It's insane to say, but it's absolutely possible. We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Monday Night Football is tonight. You got a doubleheader with the Bills and the Falcons, Commanders and Bears. Perfect time to play some parlays or some live bets. You can do that all on the amazing app of FanDuel. I love the interface of FanDuel. It is such an easy thing to do when you're trying to place bets. And when you're trying to do live bets, it's so quick, you don't feel like you're getting gypped. That's something that I've hated from past sporting books on apps in the way past, but not anymore. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments, or when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear visual data, and you can get smart categories of your spending, finally feeling in control of your money without ever touching one of those ghastly spreadsheets. So check out Monarch Money today and don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. So is it really true? Can Kansas State still find themselves in Arlington? And yes, that is absolutely true. It definitely can happen, but you need a lot of things to go right. There's no doubt about that. Let's look at the Big 12 standings heading into the new week. And remember, Kansas State is on a bye. Kansas State sits at 2-2 in the conference. The 3-4 record really doesn't matter. You're not going to be an at-large bid. It really doesn't matter. So you sit at 2-2 and you share the 2-loss record with a lot of teams inside the conference. Iowa State, Kansas, Arizona, TCU are the other teams that hold 2 losses in the conference, and that's where you sit in the middle right now. BYU, Texas Tech, and Cincinnati have not lost yet. They're all 3-0 in the conference, and then you have Utah, Arizona State, Houston, and Baylor above you with 2-1 records. Did you hear that? There's only a few teams that are undefeated right now. There is truly a possibility that the second place team in the Big 12 will have 2 losses. Kansas State currently has 2 losses. The right things just have to fall in place for Kansas State to move up the board and get themselves over the tiebreakers. You don't have to have every team lose 2 losses. You just need all but one. Somebody could go undefeated, whether it's BYU or Texas Tech. Well, not Texas Tech, because Kansas State has to play them, and Kansas State can't afford another loss. So for this conversation to be Cincinnati or BYU, one of those teams, just one could go undefeated, and then Kansas State could sneak in there. It's a very tall task. And I'm saying this before we head into this scenario, that this is very unlikely, but it's not impossible. And we're going to discuss that right here. Here's what you need to root for the games this Saturday coming up, October 18th in the Big 12. Arizona takes on Houston. That's going to be on Fox Sports 1. That's the early slate. And look, you lost to Arizona in non-conference. They are 1-2 in Big 12 play right now. Houston, you don't play them this year. They're 2-1 in Big 12 play right now. You want Arizona to win this football game because you do not play Houston. You want to get them to get their second loss of the schedule or the season and be tied with you into the mix of being inside the Big 12. Now, that still puts Arizona with 2 losses on the schedule. If it comes down to either Arizona or Kansas State being a tiebreaker, they're going to give it to Arizona. Although it's not a although it was a non-conference game, they're still going to look at head-to-head if it comes down to that type of tiebreaker. So eventually, you're going to need Arizona to lose the football game. So this one doesn't, in the factors, if we're talking about priority factors of 1 through 6, this is probably towards the bottom. I'd say probably number 4 on the list, maybe even number 5. But for who wins this game, either one will help or not help Kansas State. But I think if you had to pick one, I would root for Arizona in that football game. Baylor taking on TCU. I think this is an important game. Pay attention to priority index. I'm going to give that one number 3. And I think you need TCU to win this football game. 100%. It'll put Baylor at their second loss inside Big 12 play. They'll still own the tiebreaker after you, but they are still one game closer to being underneath you. You have the tiebreaker over TCU, so it put them both at 2-2 in the conference. However, you had the tiebreaker, so you want TCU to win that football game. That one's going to be an early slate as well, 11 o'clock Central Time, ESPN 2. The West Virginia UCF game, that game really doesn't matter for when it comes to tiebreakers for Kansas State. They are both 0-3 in Big 12 play. 3 losses, you're really out. So as long as they stay behind you, it doesn't really matter. So this game is the lowest of priority. And again, I don't think this matters. It has anything to do with Kansas State moving forward. Texas Tech versus Arizona State. This is a tough one. Absolutely tough one. But the fact that you don't play Arizona State this year, you want them to get their second loss of the season. Again, you don't have to have every team to get 2 losses. So I think you have to go with saying you're going to root for Texas Tech in this one. Get Arizona State to their second loss on the season in Big 12 play. Texas Tech goes to 7-0, but you have to take care of business against them when you play them in Manhattan later on this season. Remember, all this comes in the caveat of Kansas State winning out. They have to go 8-4. They have to go 7-2 in conference play. So I think you root for Texas Tech in this one. I absolutely do, because Arizona State would move to 2 losses in the Big 12 play. Utah taking on BYU. You want Utah to win the Holy War. It would give BYU their first loss of the season, kind of put them into that 1-loss territory where they can bop out. And, of course, you don't play BYU this year. And for Utah, it would keep them at 3-1 in the Big 12 conference. You have to play them later on this season. You could hand them their second loss, and then you would own the tiebreaker. So you want Utah to win this one. And then Cincinnati versus Oklahoma State, you want the biggest upset by far. You want Oklahoma State to win this one. You want to hand Cincinnati their first loss in Big 12 play. Not sure that one's going to happen, but that's what you need. If that happens, you would have, if all of those happen, all 5 of those scenarios happen, really 4, because the Arizona-Houston one could go either way. If that happens and you're sitting going into the week in Kansas, you're sitting a lot prettier. And I'm not going to say you control your own destiny, because it's still going to need some help, but it makes it a lot more possible when you're heading into week 9, 10, 11, and 12 to finish off the season. So again, just to round that up, it doesn't really matter between Arizona or Houston, but I'd lean towards Arizona to win that game. If you had to pick someone to root for, you want TCU over Baylor. Doesn't matter about West Virginia, UCF. And you want Texas Tech over Arizona State. You want Utah over BYU. And you want those Oklahoma State Cowboys to upset the Cincinnati Bearcats. Let me know your thoughts about the Big 12 in general. The possibilities of Arlington are still there. And I just wanted to give you a fun scenario. And this is just one kind of scenario right here. We can continue to talk this, do an Arlington watch as long as Kansas State keeps winning. Because as long as they keep winning with 2 losses on their belt and not 3, they're still in consideration to get themselves back to fighting for Dr. Pepper. So let me know your thoughts in the comment description below. If you're listening on audio, you can always find me on Twitter at LockedOnKState or Christian S. Rao. That's my personal one. Always there talking football, always there talking sports in general. You can find my work here at Locked On Kansas State, or my written work and everything else on the Blueprint Sports Network. All right, folks, thank you so much. We'll see you back here next time right here on Locked On Kansas State.